Perfect. Yeah, I see some people coming in. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. If you found your way to this webinar today, we're going to be giving you a product walkthrough of all about ASH, which as you know is about 3 weeks away. And we're going to use the next 30 minutes or so to explore the many ways that you can prepare for the enormous amount of data that's going to be coming out of ASH, especially when it comes to competitive intelligence. My name is Lynn Nguyen, and I'm the Senior Account Executive here at LARVOL. I'm joined by Dr. Mark Gramling, who is LARVOL's Director of Oncology, and he'll be giving us a walkthrough of one of those digital tools a little bit later on. And so we're going to be your hosts for today, but please feel free to use the chat to ask us any questions if you have them. And of course, we're going to be recording this and we'll be sharing it with you via email very soon. Scientific conferences like ASH are very important to our customers and these companies and beyond, and are one of the key sources of valuable new data for pharma competitive intelligence teams. So we're looking forward to diving into a little bit deeper on how you can prepare for major conferences such as ASH. Before we dive in, I wanted to also share a little bit more information about us. If you haven't met the LARVOL team before, we're a global, fully remote team serving all corners of the life science community with the data that is needed to help you make strategic decisions. Since our founding in 2004, we've continually innovated to deliver accurate data quickly and with easy-to-use tools, including everything from KOL activity to clinical trial results, and even to today's topic, which is, of course, conference coverage. So let's get started. Today, we're going to quickly show you a few ways that our digital tools can help support your CI strategy. We're going to take a look at what we already know about the data coming out of ASH, and then dig into how we can process and best make use of the data before, during, and after the event. So the three key CI areas we've identified with our oncology customers are: one, proper pre-conference planning. Secondly, easy access to compliant data that's released during the event. And then last but not least, really smart social listening to give you a feel for the opinions of the oncology community. So we'll be taking a look at what we already know and how we can support you. As of today, ASH is 3 weeks away. So what do we already know? We know that abstracts were released on November 4th, and our team quickly profiled what was there. We also know that there were over 5,000 abstracts on the docket and that they included data on more than 800 products and 1,000 MOAs. And the format is also really important to take note as well. Over the past year and a half, we've all been accustomed to completely virtual events, and prior to that, it was all in-person events. But this year, ASH is offering a hybrid model with both in-person and virtual options. And so for virtual and even hybrid events, we can really miss the elements of networking and connection that were so critical to the conference experience. We've noticed that this makes pharma teams even more eager to get their hands on the data and to take immediate action on it. And so this leads us to our first digital solution, the conference planner, which we like to call CONF for short. Our conf planners are comprehensive spreadsheets covering every single aspect of the event, including all the details related to the session. Customers are able to receive an updated version of this planner at every stage of data release. So for ASH, we've already profiled the abstracts which we released this month. And so when the late-breaking abstracts are released on November 23rd, our team will add all the new data and recirculate that planner to our customers and even highlight all of the new additions. And we're able to do this within 36 hours of data release. And even after the conference, we're also capturing Twitter activity post-conference. Here you can see a screenshot from our existing ASH planner, which I'd love to share a copy of the preliminary version with all of you after the session. And as you can see, this is a powerful, comprehensive tool that helps teams to prioritize the sessions and really get their hands on the data quickly so that you can be able to divide and conquer when you attend this conference. What's really interesting to note about oncology conferences is that this year we've added 2 additional layers. So one, we're adding trial documents so that you can associate these abstracts with every single chart or figure, and it's a one-click access to all the images and documents. And secondly, we're also looking at the oncologists and their reactions to the data being presented. We have a database of around 1,700 digital opinion leaders, or DOLs as we like to call them, and every time they are reacting to any of the data that's being presented, we have a team of analysts who are taking note of that sentiment analysis, coding it as positive, negative, unrated, to really give you a sense of what the community thinks about these particular data results. And this actually leads us to the next segment of the webinar, where we're going to be talking a little bit more about this broad platform, which powers the additional features that you see here from conference. So now I'm going to hand it over to Mark, who is going to demonstrate the CLIN platform and show you how you can be able to get information through these conferences.
Thank you, Lynn. So yeah, I'll switch gears a little bit here to introduce the CLIN platform. And just give me 1 second. I'm adjusting my video. Excuse me. Just give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. So hello, everyone. This is Mark Ramling, Director of Oncology at LARVOL, and just wanted to hone in on those 2 key new elements from our conference planners that Lynn mentioned, which is pulling in all the trial documentation, or they could maybe better be described as all the figures from all the data releases coming out from ASH, and also emphasizing from our platform perspective the reactions from the oncologists. So I will go ahead and share my screen, and I'll start with the data that we have for ASH, and then maybe explore and show a little bit more of some of the other elements of the CLIN platform. Let me share my screen. All right, so hopefully my screen is visible. I wanted to jump right, there's a lot of different elements of CLIN, but I wanted to jump right into the spirit of this webinar today, which is how both the conference planners, but also the CLIN platform can help you prepare for ASH. So I've actually pulled the data that we have to date, as Lynn was mentioning, for ASH, and show the basic structure of what we're doing with CLIN. So both for conferences as also for all of the peer-reviewed literature, the purpose of CLIN is to pull in all of the figures, all of the documents, all of the slides, and all of the data for clinical trial data releases, whether they be from conferences or peer-reviewed literature or even press releases. But in the context of this conversation, here's what the structure looks like if you're looking specifically at ASH. So we're able to pull all of the documentation for all the data releases and giving you access and a preview to that slide, to that figure for your review. So you have immediate access. And as Lynn said, this is something we process within 36 hours. And as the conference, as ASH goes live, the data releases coming out during the course of the conference will be processing in real time. So you can have access to all of that data in one space. And this is searchable, of course, by tumor type, by particular drug, and also searchable by other terms as well. Setting, staging, particular trial ID as well. So you can really hone down, not just for planning your attendance for ASH, but also being able to see and having a preview to the figures themselves. That's a basic structure of what we're doing in our conference coverage, leveraging the CLIN tool. To just highlight a couple of other elements. I'll actually go ahead and jump to the social media element, which Lynn mentioned is part of the conference planner, but it's integrated into the CLIN platform as well. So when you see here for this trial that's coming up on top, there's 7 Twitter reactions. What we mean by that is we're tracking around 1,700 to 1,800 verified oncologists and digital opinion leaders on social media, and we're tracking, curating, and putting sentiment analysis on their responses to the data release itself. So not just tracking their Twitter activity, but also pivoting it to the particular data release. So if I were to click on that, those Twitter reactions for this Venticlax trial, you can see here that from the oncologists and the digital opinion leaders that we track, we're able to pull in their sentiment, positive, neutral, or negative, pull in their tweets based on our paid API agreement with Twitter, and bring you all of that content, their reactions. So there's a lot of applications here for how you might want to reach out to key opinion leaders, digital opinion leaders for medical affairs, and maybe a particular launch perspective that you're constructing or a strategy there. So that gives a little bit of color to what we mean by the social media reactions to CLIN. And just to put a couple faces to that construct is here we actually have a ranked system based on their online and offline activity, number of citations, and such. Here's some faces to associate with what we're doing with the social media reactions on CLIN. So you can see here sort of the top rankings in and amongst our 17 to 1,800 oncologists that we're tracking. So take a step back though, on CLIN, I just wanted to sort of, so that's what we're doing for ASH. So that's a huge, that's the premise of this conversation, is that's how we're pulling this data in for ASH. But to further emphasize the point is that where our conference planners, you can select them, one at a time based on your particular interest. At CLIN, we're on the platform, we're covering 70 to 80 plus conferences. So ASH is one of the major conferences we cover. We cover around 80 oncology conferences overall. And this type of coverage is applicable to ASH, to ESMO, to ASCO GU, ASCO GI, and all of the major conferences therein. So that's, CLIN gives you a little bit more of a sort of broad access to the data, and allows you a little bit more exploration to the data set itself. So I wanted to say that first from the conference perspective, but then to step back for a second, I wanted to just illustrate that CLIN is not just about conference coverage, it's about being all inclusive, as I stated before, about all of the data. So to take a step back, if you go to the CLIN platform and you look for all data, you could even search within a broad area outside of a conference and see all of that in one space. So I guess in the context of ASH, if I were to search for a particular disease area, that you will have all of the conference literature as well as all of the peer-reviewed literature in one space. So again, just an incredibly broad search for acute myeloid leukemia that you can have, obviously, ASH data, as I'm showing here. But if you continue to scroll down, you're going to see all of the different conference data from a variety of conferences, all collected into one space under the trial, as well as the peer-reviewed literature as well. So we obviously have about 40% of our database is conference coverage, about 40% is the peer-reviewed literature. But if I continue to scroll, you'll see here that, of course, we were going to cover the peer-reviewed literature here from the journal Hematologic Oncology as well. So as a big step back, that's a tool that we have within CLIN for your research purposes, staying on top of not just conferences, but also the overall literature as well. Just a couple of features I like to emphasize that I think are related to planning digitally for ASH and other conferences. We've inserted this feature as well, wherein if you're interested in a particular trial, You can ask an analyst for topics such as related trials, additional information on the trial, or other inquiries, and we can respond to you within 48 hours on any inquiry for a particular trial. And this sort of creates sort of a social element to the CLIN platform as well, because we do anonymize it, but we do post this information on CLIN as a transference of information for the community user. So I want to emphasize that. And then also wanted to highlight just on the very top right of the screen, if you can see my cursor, that you can also bookmark trials for the obvious reasons of revisiting that trial data later. But what that also sets up for you is the ability to get alerts to whenever there's new data releases for that trial. So for example, in the context of this first trial I'm showing here, as soon as we have this screenshot and this link to the data for this ASH poster, if you had bookmarked or you're interested in that trial, you would be alerted to that immediately to your inbox. So that's an important element of, maybe it's separate from conference planning, but staying on top of particular trials as well. So I wanted to emphasize that. And I'm actually I get a little bit too excited. I might have been speaking a little too fast. I see there might be some entries into the chat box. Let me check that real quick. And so this is coming, so the question, will these slides be available to us for a reference following the presentation? And, oh, sorry, Lynn already answered that. So yes, to put maybe a broader response to that, we like to think of this element of CLIN that I'm talking about now as being sort of the Library of Congress. We want to take up the archiving responsibility of this data. So maintaining it, having the historical data as well. We've, in terms of conferences, been able to backtrack, if you will, and archive 3 to 5 years of historical data. And within the public literature, we've been able to archive to date, after our soft launch at ASCO earlier in the year, upwards of 10 years back of that public data associated with clinical trials. So that archiving function, creating that tool is very important. So thus, to the spirit of the question, it would be available to you after the conference itself. So appreciate that. So that's sort of the main driver in terms of competitive intelligence, in terms of conference planning, having all of this at your fingertips, having it available to you after the conference as well, if you're unable to attend, and putting all of that together is one main driver of the CLIN platform, supporting the conference planning and the conference planners that Lynn presented. But I did want to do a little bit of a switch gear to show sort of the other elements of what we're doing with CLIN. And that's digitizing this wealth of public data. So one of the things we endeavored to do when we started this project, which is actually sort of one of the initial motivators of the project, was could we take outcomes data, overall survival, PFS to start, and could we digitize it from the public literature to make it fungible and make it searchable in a way that's helpful in many different ways, competitive intelligence, research and development, etc. I wanted to go ahead and jump over to that to show you a little bit of what we're doing with digitized data. And obviously, any and all data coming out of ASH or coming out of conferences are also digitized in real time. So I just had done a quick search here within lymphoma. And if I were to scroll down, you can see that the system can pull all of the digitized CAPLIN data and allows you to review. Let me click just a couple items. Allows you to review the nature of those studies, giving you a link to the initial source, a definition of the treatment arms and putting all of that data into one space. Now we realize there are statistical limitations of making comparisons, but we are really hoping as a tool for CLIN is that this is a first step for maybe a meta-analysis in a box if you want a top-line assessment looking at 2 different trials. So you can see here I've just put a couple different rituximab trials onto one visual, and it allows you to put all that together. Bookmark trials, you can also select to say anything you picked out in the previous screens that I showed. You can also populate this digitized KM curve from there, or you can review based on your searches, again, searching by condition, intervention, or other term, and putting all of that into one space. And so that's what we're doing with the digitization of overall survival and progression-free survival as well. And finally, as we're extracting and digitizing this data, of course, we also pull out the complementary hazard ratios for overall survival and PFS as well. So this is, again, a rather broad search. I'm sure searches would be more specific than this, but you can put together and compare hazard ratios for overall survival and PFS across a variety of different trials. You can scroll down and select not just the trial, it's certainly not just one data set per trial. In the case of this trial that I'm coming down to here for advanced Hodgkin's, there could be many different representations and different hazard ratios of the data. And if you continue to scroll down, you can also see, if I can select quickly, that will also have the historical data. So for a particular trial, the data, the hazard ratios, as well as the Kaplan curves may have progressed from 2018 to 2019 to 2020 and now. And we'll have that historical data as well, in addition to the figures, which I mentioned prior. So that's sort of a different element of what we're doing with CLIN in terms of digitized data. So I wanted to make sure I could share that with you all here today. Maybe I'll take a pause to see if there are any items in the chat or any questions, and be happy to answer any of those. And if not, happy to maybe pitch it back over to Lynn for some concluding comments and maybe some things we'd like to offer for participants here today.
Thank you, Mark, for your presentation. Looks like we do have a question coming in. Do you have permission from these conferences to show all of this?
It's a great question. So we're very compliant focused. So we're virtually attending, if you were to see as you go through the data, we're virtually attending 18 to 20 of these conferences. And so we have that access. And also our customers that we engage with, we also have a system in place with them. If they have access to that data as well, all of that is certainly congruent. So, but you may have seen as I was going through that in certain instances, when you click on a particular figure, it's low resolution, whereas in other cases, you click on a figure, it's high resolution. And what we base that on from a compliance standpoint with assessment from our legal department is, what's behind a login or a paywall. So if anything is requiring a login, then what we're going to provide is a low resolution image. If there's any issues in that regard, the same way that Google Images does. But if access is there or it's in the public domain, then we can provide a full high resolution access to the image. So that's point one. And point two, the digitized data, you may be familiar with going to your medical communications departments of redigitizing data so that there are no compliance issues. That's what we're doing in mass is that step, to digitize it such that it can be a point of information for you without any of those issues. So I hope that helps to answer the question.
Thank you, Mark. Let's see if there's any other questions. Not seeing anything else come in, but please don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@larvol.com if you do have any other questions that may have come up after the webinar. As a little thank you for joining us today, we want to be able to support your efforts in using these digital tools to manage CI at ASH. So we'd like to equip you with a few free tools. So within the coming day or so, you're going to be getting an email with a free preliminary planner for ASH, as well as access to the data at CLIN. It's a new platform this year, so we'd love to get your feedback. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or suggestions. And thank you, Mark, and everyone for joining us today. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you.